Do you remember watching reruns of this after school?
To the land of the lost.
A father and his two kids fell through a waterfall and landed in a world where dinosaurs hunted them, reptilian creatures lurked in ancient ruins, and the way home might not exist at all. Somehow, this low-budget Saturday morning show from 1974 created one of the strangest and most imaginative worlds television had ever attempted. But behind the scenes, the show was already running into problems that would eventually bring it to an abrupt end. The premise everyone remembers.
You know, there's plenty of food around, but most of it's strange and unfamiliar to us, so we're going to have to be careful about eating something that we haven't tested. Now listen, I'm going to go down to the end of the arbor. I want you both to...
Land of the Lost premiered on NBC in September 1974. The premise was simple but unforgettable. The Marshall family, Rick, Will, and Holly, are swept over a waterfall while rafting and land in a world where time has no rules. Dinosaurs roam the jungle. The Pakuni, a tribe of primitive ape people, communicate using a language that was actually constructed for the show. And lurking in the shadows are the Sleestaks, reptilian creatures with glowing eyes and a taste for ritual.
So that's a Sleestak, huh?
The show ran for 3 seasons and 43 episodes, becoming a cult classic for a generation of kids who grew up with it. It combined live actors with stop-motion dinosaurs and men in monster suits, creating a fantasy world that felt huge, even on a shoestring budget. Chances are you didn't just watch Land of the Lost. You lived in it for half an hour every Saturday morning. But the strange truth is, the show almost never existed at all. Why kids took this world seriously?
It's a tyrannosaur. Come on, let's get going before he sees us. Come on. Come on!
What made Land of the Lost stand out wasn't just dinosaurs or strange creatures. It was the way the show treated its world like a real place. Most Saturday morning television in the 1970s was designed to reset every week. Characters got into trouble, escaped danger, and everything went back to normal before the credits rolled. But Land of the Lost didn't work that way.
Little one has fallen. He's hurt himself.
The Marshalls were trapped. Every episode built on the idea that this strange world had rules, history, and mysteries that slowly revealed themselves over time. The crystals scattered through the caves weren't just decoration. They powered ancient technology. The pylons scattered across the land hinted at a lost civilization. And the Sleestaks weren't simply monsters. They were the decayed remnants of something much older. For kids watching at the time, it felt less like a cartoon adventure and more like exploring an actual world. The birth of the show.
Dad, be careful.
Easy, Dad!
Be careful.
I was right. This is the key to us getting out.
NBC wanted dinosaurs. The Croft brothers, Sid and Marty, were already famous for their surreal, psychedelic kids shows like H.R. Pufnstuf and Sigmund and the Sea Monsters. But this time, they wanted something bigger. Something that could compete with the adventure serials and sci-fi comics kids were reading. They brought in David Gerrold, a young writer who'd made his name with Star Trek's The Trouble with Tribbles. Gerrold later said the entire concept started from a scrapbook of sci-fi magazine images the producers handed him. Dinosaurs, jungles, strange creatures, mysterious technology. They didn't have a story, they had a title and a pile of science fiction magazine covers. Gerrold took that pile of weird pulp imagery and spun it into a world. He built a mythology where time loops, alternate dimensions, and ancient civilizations all collided. The result was a show that felt unusual for Saturday morning television. Half pulp adventure, half serious science fiction. And somehow that pile of weird pulp imagery became one of the most imaginative worlds kids' TV had ever attempted. Why the show was so different.
My ancestors.
Huh?
I am of the generation to be born to this place. 10,000, perhaps 100,000 years from now.
Land of the Lost wasn't just another Saturday morning cartoon. It was ambitious in ways that most kids' shows never dared to be. The show tackled serious science fiction concepts, time portals, dimensional nodes, and evolving mythology. Some episodes were philosophical, asking questions about fate, free will, and the nature of civilization. The Sleestaks, for example, weren't just monsters. They were revealed to be the degenerate descendants of a once advanced race called the Altrusians. Enoch, the lone Altrusian, was a tragic figure, an exile trying to save his people from their own decline. For a kids' show, this was unusually deep world-building. It was a show that trusted its audience to keep up, unlike the shows they make today. The Science Fiction Brain Trust. Here's something most fans never knew. Land of the Lost had a writing staff that would make any sci-fi fan jealous.
It is as if the law of conservation of temporal momentum has been reversed. I cannot go home, although...
David Gerrold brought in friends from the world of serious science fiction. Larry Niven, Norman Spinrad, Walter Koenig. These were writers who'd worked on Star Trek, written Hugo-winning novels, and shaped the genre for decades. Kids thought they were watching dinosaurs chase people through the jungle. What they were actually watching was serious science fiction disguised as children's television. The scripts often included ideas rarely seen in children's television at the time. The writers slipped in references to time paradoxes, closed causal loops, and even the dangers of unchecked technology. On paper, Land of the Lost was becoming one of the most imaginative shows on Saturday mornings. But the same ambition that made the show special was also making it harder and harder to produce. The Hidden Educational Experiment. The show wasn't just about monsters and time travel. It was also an experiment in education, hidden in plain sight.
Japon! Chaka! Japon!
The Pakuni, the show's tribe of ape men, didn't just grunt and gesture. Their language was real. UCLA linguistics professor Victoria Fromkin was hired to create a full Pakuni language, complete with about 300 words and its own grammar rules, inspired by West African languages. Kids watching the show slowly learned the vocabulary over time. It may have been one of the few shows where kids were unknowingly exposed to a constructed language every Saturday morning. This attention to detail gave the world of Land of the Lost a sense of depth and authenticity that set it apart from anything else on Saturday morning. One of the most unique aspects about the show was the way its science fiction ideas slowly unfolded. Episodes introduced mysterious pylons, dimensional gateways, and strange crystals that powered ancient technology. The show never explained everything directly. Instead, the mysteries built gradually, encouraging viewers to piece the world together themselves. The monsters that defined childhood. For many kids, Land of the Lost was the first time monsters actually felt scary. The Sleestaks, tall, green, hissing, with glowing eyes, were played by actors in heavy rubber suits. They moved slowly, lurking in the shadows, and their eerie, echoing hiss became the stuff of playground nightmares. Did you ever notice that there were never more than 3 Sleestaks in every scene? Future NBA star Bill Laimbeer was one of the performers inside a Sleestak suit while still in high school. Then there was Grumpy, the T-Rex, brought to life with stop-motion animation and clever camera tricks. The Pakuni, led by Chaka, added both comic relief and a sense of wonder. For a generation, these creatures weren't just TV monsters. They were the first villains you ever rooted against, the first heroes you ever cheered for. The world was bigger than the budget. Despite the ambition of the scripts, the production itself was constantly fighting limitations. The show was filmed almost entirely on indoor sound stages, with sets rearranged and reused to represent different parts of the prehistoric world. The jungle you saw each week wasn't miles of wilderness. It was a carefully dressed studio space filled with foam rocks, painted backdrops, and artificial foliage. The dinosaurs were created using stop-motion animation, a painstaking technique where a model is moved slightly between individual frames of film. It was slow, expensive, and incredibly time-consuming. But when the finished footage was combined with the live-action scenes, it created something that looked far more impressive than the show's actual budget should have allowed. For kids watching at home, the illusion worked perfectly. The show's ambition versus its budget. On television, the Land of the Lost looked enormous. In reality, most of it existed inside a handful of carefully arranged studio sets. The production team used every trick in the book: stop-motion dinosaurs, miniatures, rear projection, and reused effects shots. The show combines stop-motion film with live video footage to avoid blue-screen halos, a tricky technical process for the time. Sets were redressed and repainted to become new locations. The waterfall portal was a simple practical effect, but it became iconic. The show's ambition constantly ran up against its budget, but the team's creativity made it feel bigger than it was. Watching as a kid, you never noticed the limitations. You just saw a world that felt real. By the time the second season ended, the cracks were starting to show, and the next change would alter the show in a way fans immediately noticed. Season 3 felt different. When Season 3 arrived, longtime viewers immediately noticed the difference. Rick Marshall, the father who had anchored the family dynamic for 2 seasons, was suddenly gone. In his place was Uncle Jack, played by Ron Harper, and honestly is still probably one of the weirdest character switches in television history. Rick Marshall left the show over disputes about merchandising rights and compensation. The show tried to continue the adventure formula, but the change drastically altered the emotional center of the series. Without the original family structure, the world of the show felt less grounded. At the same time, the production budget was tightening. Some of the ambitious storytelling from earlier seasons became harder to sustain, and episodes leaned more heavily on familiar creatures and reused sets. The strange, mysterious world was still there, but something had shifted. Why the show ended. By 1976, the show had reached the end of its run. Rising production challenges, cast changes, and shifting network priorities made it increasingly difficult to maintain the same ambitious vision. The show's ambition was always bigger than its resources. As costs rose and ratings slipped, NBC decided to move on. There was no grand finale, no closure, just a quiet fade-out. But the story didn't end there. Even after its original run ended, the show quickly found a second life in reruns, where a new generation of kids discovered the strange world of Sleestaks, Pakuni, and mysterious pylons. For many viewers, it became one of those shows that lived in the back of your memory, half adventure, half mystery. The kind of series you might not think about for years, until you hear that familiar theme song again. The Unexpected Legacy. The show ran in reruns for decades, introducing new generations to its strange world. In 1991, a remake tried to recapture the magic. In 2009, a big-budget movie adaptation brought the Sleestaks and Grumpy to a new audience, though with a very different tone. The original series became one of the most remembered Croft productions. Were you disappointed when they added Uncle Jack? Let us know what you loved or hated about the show.